teaching you the art of industrial real estate. This is On Air with Team Jensen.
Hello. Welcome to episode 7 of On Air with Team Jensen, the art of industrial real estate. Today we have Andrew Johnson with ShelfAware on with us. Thanks for coming on, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Appreciate you taking the time and really excited to kind of dive into what you got going with ShelfAware as well as O-Ring, the other company that you're pretty heavily involved with. So just kind of wanted to jump right into it. I know you're a Kansas City guy. Mm-hmm. Do you want to kind of tell your backstory a little bit about, where you grew up and how you fell into the ShelfAware business that you're in today?
Sure. It's a similar story to Team Jensen, really. It's my dad started a O-ring and seal company in 1982, and then I was born in 85, and my whole life has been wrapped up in this industrial supply marketplace. The O-ring company sells, it sounds silly because sometimes people say, what does your dad do for a living? And I'd say, he sells O-rings. And they're like, well, how the hell do you make a living selling O-rings?
Sells a lot of them.
Yeah, well, there's O-rings everywhere. Yeah, they're in everything. You just got to sell a lot of them. And you can because they're in almost everything you touch, every day. And so it's this really weird market that just operates behind the scenes. But the broader market we're operating in is in the industrial supply market. And that would be synonymous with giants. Well, there's a big giant one here in Kansas City, based out of Kansas City in Merriam, called IBT,
sure,
Industrial Supply.
Yep.
So I wouldn't call us direct competitors with them, but we are in the same sphere.
Okay.
And that's kind of always been our market in my whole life. And then, like Team Jensen, I work with my family members. So I have 3 sisters, and just generally, I don't think the girls were too impressed with an industrial distribution company, so they went off and pursued their own careers and married great dudes, entrepreneurial guys that ended up through a series of not planned events. My dad swears it wasn't planned, but now all 3 of my brother-in-laws work at this company.
Nice.
Yes.
All right.
Well, if it works, it's really cool.
It is really cool, and it works really well. Part of why it works is they're very different than each other and me.
Right.
And so we tend to stay in our own lanes. We don't conflict a lot.
Yeah.
My dad's a pretty fair owner, founder, which that can cause a lot of problems.
Sure.
But he's been really good about the whole thing. So the 4 brothers kind of started working on the company instead of just in it in 2015. And we came up with, we had a series of other ideas that software and technology ideas to make the business more efficient. And that led us up to inventing ShelfAware, which is my primary responsibility today. I still own part of the O-Ring company. I help them with international sourcing pieces. So I'll be going back to Southeast Asia here probably in January if I can get all my tickets booked and I don't shut the world down again. And I've done that for many years. And so I kind of still maintain that role. I own the company. I help them out. I advise them, and I do some international sourcing for them. But otherwise, I'm pretty much committed to ShelfAware, this supply chain automation platform that we built while we were at O-Ring.
Right.
Yeah.
And can you explain? I know you probably have done it a million times by now, but can you explain a little bit about ShelfAware and what it can help your customers accomplish with their supply chain?
Sure. It is a little bit hard to explain. So the easiest way to explain it to people that aren't in the industrial supply market is it is really like if you've ever gone onto a convenience store and you grab a bag of chips or a bottle of pop. We're basically running industrial convenience stores on factory floors using automated technology. So we have RFID smart labels. It's radio frequency identification that's embedded inside the product packaging. So it'd be like a bag of O-rings or a box of hose and fittings or some metal widgets or maybe a case count of fasteners. And all of these industrial products are sitting in pallet racks and on shelving, and they all have smart labels on them that allow us to track the movement of that product off factory shelves. And then we push that movement, which we boil down to consumption data, so the inventory's been consumed. We push that data back to the industrial suppliers involved in the supply chain and automate essentially the supply chain by creating orders for them out of the system. So it'd be similar to some automated convenience store. Actually, there's one in the brand new Kansas City airport called Just Walk Out. It's at the end of Terminal B. It's down by the very end, but it's an Amazon product, and they've licensed it now to a whole bunch of convenience store retailers. And the Just Walk Out technology is different than what ShelfAware is offering, but it's similar in its effectiveness. So you, at the Kansas City airport, you can walk in, you present your credit card to the stanchion, then you walk in and grab your pop and your your snack mix. And I just put a video up on my LinkedIn feed
Yeah, I saw that. I was
of
gonna
me
say.
using it at the airport and making the contrast in comparison to what ShelfAware is doing on factory floors.
Right.
So that was like phase one of ShelfAware. We invented it in 15. We have some patents around the RFID hardware. And then phase two, which I'm working on, is this. What we're building on top of it is really a network of industrial supply companies that are in the ShelfAware platform. We call it cloud sourcing, but it basically allows independent suppliers that, like guys like my dad, that just sell O-rings to stay independent and just sell O-rings and not get acquired by the big industrial giants. And so they can stay independent, just sell O-rings, but offer vendor managed inventory services, and they can do that collectively with a host of other industrial suppliers who are also pot committed to their product vertical. But what the customers are all looking for is what Fastenal and Grainger and IBT are all trying to provide, which is this one-stop shop.
Right.
They want to be like the Amazon marketplace of
Right.
industrial supply. And to do that's very difficult in the industrial market because there's lots of product knowledge that goes into each of these engineered product verticals.
Yeah.
And if you're not an O-ring guy, you just don't know anything about O-rings. So
Right.
it's hard to sell them. And they look simple, but they're not. And it's the same way for fasteners and fittings and hose and electronic wiring components. There's tons of, not like black magic, but just industry know-how that goes into that. And so generalists typically are just kind of good at everything and great at nothing. And if you can put a bunch of specialists on a singular supply chain platform, then collectively they look like one giant specialist
Right.
to the consumer, to the manufacturing consumer. So that's phase two. And then phase three, which this will be like the first public announcement of phase three, we're working on we effectively have cloud sourcing done. I mean, it's not fully fledged because I need more licensing deals and more product verticals to make it more robust. But I have a couple dozen industrial suppliers operating and pushing the platform out all across North America today. So phase three then is getting some supplier and consumer out there to allow my team of developers to put a blockchain node on top of the physical ShelfAware inventory management system, and that'll allow us to automate accounts receivable and accounts payable in the industrial marketplace through a series of trusted contracts.
Yeah. No, that would make some people's lives a little bit easier, I'd imagine.
Oh yeah, yeah. AR/AP is a nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's my background is in accounting. I have a bachelor's in accounting, so
Okay.
all those documents that go back and forth just.
Who had some of the expertise when it came to the root of it and developing software? I mean, if your background wasn't necessarily software, just who had some of that knowledge?
Yeah, great question. And it's one of my favorite topics. I really think technology today is becoming much more democratized. It's a lot easier for the common individual with no real professional training to get into software programming and developing of custom hardware and software combinations. And so effectively, none of my brothers had any experience, me included. So I was a bachelor in accounting. My oldest brother-in-law, Adam, who wrote all the original software, is self-taught. He had a master's in physical education and had planned on being a track coach here in Kansas City. Couldn't find a job,
cool.
and so he found out no coach ever retires, apparently. They just coach till they die.
Right.
So he never found his coaching job, started working for my dad in the warehouse. And then when we were coming up with these ideas, he was just leaning on a friend of his who is a programmer, and his friend was just directing him to YouTube videos. Would send him a hyperlink on how to do like a SQL interjoin, and he would practice at home. And then that's how we started developing software. That would have been like in 2013. And then we all kind of played different roles. So I'm the kind of the bullshitting visionary guy who comes up with the solution conceptually, but it like actually hasn't ever worked.
How do we make this happen?
We're gonna do it, and I promise it to people before we've even built it. Kind of like I did with the phase 3 blockchain thing. It's not executed, but we know we can do it. I feel confident in my team that we can execute it. We just have to find the right beta. So that's how we operated for a long time. And then my other brother-in-law, Jay, he's the optimizer, and he's also a true innovator. And innovation's hard because if you have a great system today, like you were mentioning before we went live, that you were just doing this silly thing for this other company of like taking paper documents, your first job, and was just scanning them all day long for this guy, like scanning stuff all day long. Obviously, there's technology that can do that better.
Right.
But for them to adopt the technology, they gotta like try something brand new and then potentially fire you And if they like you and you're doing a good job and you're relatively cheap and they can afford you, it's like, why come up with this weird scanning software?
Apparently that wasn't a problem.
Yeah, apparently it wasn't. Apparently it was not. But oftentimes it is. And that change piece is the piece that's hard. And my brother-in-law, Jay, is the type that will just burn down. He has no, I don't want to call him cold, but he's effective in his, he'll hear my vision and he really thinks about well, is Andrew just completely full of it this time, or is there something to this? And then if there is something to it, he will be the first one to light a match to the current process.
Yeah.
And sometimes he would destroy things and would force us to change because we hadn't built the solution yet. So he would just wreck something in our office and be like, we're never doing it like this again. We're like, well, we don't have a solution to replace it. And he's like, well, we better come up with one by Friday. It's like, okay, great. So that was the team. My other brother-in-law, Evan, wasn't around for the early innovations, but what he brings to the table now is he's a mechanical engineer with so he's a great fit for the O-ring industry and industrial marketplace. And
at least one of you,
right? At least one of us is technically
a true engineer.
Yeah, truly, qualified to work there. But he has a personality that's very methodical, and he's level-headed. And like myself and Jay, especially, can get pretty passionate and energetic, and sometimes be a little bit driven by our emotions. So Evan is kind of like the stabilizing factor between the four of us. Yeah. And so we work really well together.
An engineer.
Yeah, well thought out, analytical.
A realist, Sounds like a good balance, though.
Yeah. So fate kind of brought us that balance, and then my mom and dad have done a good job of curating kind of the family atmosphere and helping with the transition of the company.
And it's hard to have that kind of balance if you don't have a good relationship at the root of that dynamic.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously you have probably a good familial relationship with everybody, and that's a big part of it too.
Yeah,
so.
It is.
And you all have kids that are about the same age, growing up together?
No, there's tons of them.
Yeah.
Too many, yeah. There's 12 in the next generation.
All right.
I don't
fun.
remember if it was something you posted online or literally if I was over there looking at space or something next door to you all. But at one point I remember seeing in your warehouse, you had it all set up and all the grandkids were doing like big wheel races or trike races.
I think he put a post up on LinkedIn about
was that maybe that's what it was.
Yeah. We've kind of gotten out of the ritual of that, but for many years when the kids were really little, now they have too many sports and stuff.
Right.
It's
Other
crazy
things
busy.
going on.
But when they're all pretty little and toddlers, we had the big warehouse space, and so we had go-karts and little trikes and power wheels and stuff. And
fun,
we did it every month end. Because on our old ERP system, you used to have to do an accounting month-end process to close out the general ledger from one month and move to the next. And that meant somebody had to stay late. And so it's usually either myself or when I was doing it, which wasn't for very long, but then mostly my brother-in-law, Adam, he's the financial controller, so he's been doing it for a long time now. So he would stay late, so my dad would bring him dinner, and then that would just evolve into let's just buy dinner for the whole family. Then everybody bring their kids. And then we have a bouncy house. I don't know if you saw that one, but there's a bouncy house we bought. We inflate that. And
Those are a hit.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Big family atmosphere.
Kids have some awesome things these days. Our oldest sister, she has a one of those play bouncy houses that and it's like a water slide and everything. And if I would have had that when we had to go to the neighbors to jump on the trampoline.
Oh, no. Yeah.
We were really shafted.
Yeah, it was a real tough upbringing.
Rough life, I'm sure. Yeah, my kids are spoiled rotten.
We turned out all right.
He did.
Made it.
Well, that's a great background. And I mean, as far as Kansas City based, you feel like it's a pretty great location for you, right in the middle of the country. And I mean, it's especially for ShelfAware with what you're wanting to promote there. I think there's a lot of big distribution networks here that come through Kansas City.
There are. It's a great space for this. I found a lot of great resources here between RFID technology vendors, a lot of customers, good customer base, good manufacturing space, a lot of industrial. I'm higher on the city now with their new airport. It's a lot, and I'm hopeful that we'll get a lot more flights because the only knock on Kansas City up to this point has been it's kind of difficult for me to do what I do, which is travel all over the place. Pitching the system and putting it into factories. It's hard to get in and out of Kansas City. So that's the only knock I had. But we have a brand new airport. It's beautiful, and hopefully get some more flights on the schedule so I can fly more direct places.
Right.
But otherwise, I love it, and I've traveled all over the world. I've been to Asia a lot, and to a lot of different countries, and I would have nowhere else but Kansas City as my home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I find it interesting that you're the one in the family that goes over to Asia. How long have you been making that trip? And did your dad used to make it with you, or is that something you kind of started doing?
Yeah, it's something I started. So my dad, historically, he had like, the O-ring market, like a lot of markets, went. It was all made in America back in the 50s and 60s, all your engineered product verticals. And then a lot of it got pushed in the O-ring market got pushed to Europe first because the Europeans came up with this idea of injection molded rubber, which made it more efficient. And then the labor rates and really the advent of like Chinese labor and Taiwanese labor, that kind of blew up in the 80s and 90s. And my dad was busy here growing the sales side of it. And so instead of investing his time on the back end side, the supply chain side, the sourcing side, he spent everything on the biz dev side, the sales side. And he just didn't have enough resources to do the overseas work himself. And so he relied on an importer and a set of importers that would do that kind of work for him. And then when I came along in the business, this was like I started for him in 2009. One of those old importers came in, and this gentleman has been doing this forever. He actually started going to Italy and then importing O-ring product from Italy and selling it here in the States against the big brand name, which is in our space is Parker Hannifin. And so Parker Hannifin at the time kind of had they still do have a lot of the market cornered on this engineered industrial product. And so anyway, this importer who had kind of cracked the code, his name's Harry. He's kind of a business mentor of mine. He just showed up at our office one day, friends of my dad, and they've been doing business a long time. And he kind of jokingly said to my dad, "Hey, I'm getting older. It'd be great if somebody would like carry my bags." And so my dad's like, "Oh, AJ'd carry your bags." So he brought me in the conference room. He's like, "Hey, you want to carry his bags?" I'm like, "Sure, well, whatever." So at the time, if I had kids, let's see, my daughter might have been a baby, and I think I left Asia, and I just had my one daughter. Now I have 3 kids, so it's harder now to leave. Sure. But I started traveling with Harry, carrying his bags and learning the overseas market, and it's become an important part of our little company's growth strategy because we feel like we have the world's like one of the world's best supply chains in O-rings, and we have one of the best relationships because of Harry really helping me build those relationships. In Asia, it's difficult to build relationships across generations. So if you're 20-something, it's hard to go talk to an 80-year-old factory owner.
Yeah, definitely.
Like this dude's in prestige-wise and wisdom-wise is like up here, and he's almost like unattainable. You're not going to get at a table with him and like negotiate.
Right.
So Harry bridged that generational gap. So he's turned 81 this year.
Yeah.
And he's going back to Asia with me.
Oh, that's awesome.
Still travels with me.
How is
very
it
cool.
learning those foreign business dynamics and just, I know we've dealt a little bit with it, and I've been exposed to it just through some of the Panasonic stuff with the Japanese folks. But I mean, it certainly has got to be interesting going to different cultures and just those business dynamics have got to be interesting. And took a while to learn and catch on to how to approach something and things like that, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important just to listen a lot and like take it all in. So I think the first couple trips I took that kind of role of carrying Harry's bags seriously.
Right.
And whatever he did, I did. He had a routine, and so I just went with it.
Yeah.
I actually took my brother-in-law Jay on a trip a couple years ago to try and like get him plugged into the whole idea, and Harry and him just like oil and water. And it was mainly because Jay just didn't want to coalesce with Harry's routine.
Right.
And Harry'd been doing it forever, so like he had this formula.
Right.
So I think I got along really well and did well because I came into it with a very open mind and just thought like whatever Harry does, I'll do. Whatever he says, I'll say, and I'll just follow his lead.
It's clearly successful.
Yeah, it's worked out.
Yeah.
You hear that, Kurt?
I knew there was something coming.
Yeah.
Kurt doesn't follow that theory quite so much.
Well, in Kurt's defense, I would say that the overseas experience is the only time in my life that I really followed that well. It took me totally out of my element, so I felt like I had no choice. But
I appreciate
otherwise, I do buck the generational gap a lot.
Did you
Oh,
fa-
yeah. And that first year or two learning on the job, certainly those are good times too, to just listen as much as you can. Be
Is
learning.
there a specific part that you favor the most from a trip perspective, like where you like to do business or where you enjoy the people the most or that kind of thing?
I've met some of the best people in India. I have some really close relationships, almost family at this point. We do a lot of business with them, which helps. Money lubricates relationships like that pretty well.
For sure.
But it is pretty great when you can get along with your, whoever you're a customer of or one of your customers.
Yeah. And these are all relationships where we're buying the product from these overseas factories. So we're the customer.
Mutually beneficial.
Very much so.
Obviously.
Yeah. So great relationships in India with some folks in India. And then we do a lot of business in Taiwan. We still buy a lot of things from China, but the scenario in China is getting pretty dark.
Yeah.
And it has been for a long time. So we've actually moved a lot of our supply chain out of China and into Vietnam. We did that like a decade ago.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of great relationships in Vietnam. I'd say like in the trip, generally I'll hit like 2 or 3 countries or maybe 3 or 4 countries and do it in 2 weeks. Probably do like 8 cities, stay nowhere more than 2 nights. Probably fit in like 12 factories, 14 factories.
That's a grind.
It's a grind. It's not fun. And then if I'm going to take any time off, it would be in Vietnam. I'll stop in Ho Chi Minh, and there's a couple factories I'll see there. Then I'll take like a day or 2 of like doing nothing but lounge around the hotel and maybe walk around Ho Chi Minh looking for a good bowl of pho or some iced coffee or something.
I was going to ask. I have to ask. It's a little off topic, but what's like the weirdest thing you've eaten while traveling over there?
Well,
are you a picky eater?
No, I'll try anything. I really don't like chicken's feet, like stewed chicken's feet.
I wouldn't.
I don't get it. And from being like a Kansas kind of farm rural kid who's like parents have chickens, like when they're like, oh, the chicken feet, it's like I don't understand that at all. Like, but it's every piece of protein is coveted.
Right.
In Southeast Asia, they just don't have we're very affluent here and spoiled, frankly.
Just no waste.
No, not at all. Yeah. So that little tidbit of skin and whatever meat you think might be on a chicken's foot, there's very little. But that cartilage, I had sometimes I stay at Marriott's a lot, and so generally their food's great there, and they'll do some like traditional stuff. But it was either at a Marriott or some really nice restaurant. But they had a big Lazy Susan full of food, and you just spin it around and just kind of start dishing up your own plates, kind of the style there. And this particular place, they had little placard cards that like translated into English what was in the pot. And generally I don't trust those because they don't translate them very well. And so the Lazy Susan spun around in this big black pot, and there was a little card in front of it that said chicken gristle casserole. Chicken gristle casserole. And so I was like, chicken gristle casserole? Maybe it's just chicken casserole. Like, surely it wouldn't just be pure gristle. Like, why would anybody? But so I took a spoonful, put it on my plate, and the first bite is like crunchy, like.
Oh gosh.
It's like, it's just gristle. It's just like chicken's kneecaps and ankle tendons, and that's what they'd put in the casserole.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, all the crunchy weird bits.
Wow.
So yeah.
Yeah, I bet you've seen and had some things. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, wild times.
Yeah.
Couple things. I've heard Vietnam's beautiful.
It is. Yeah, it's beautiful. I love going there from a vacation standpoint the most, and I spend my kind of like downtime there because it's beautiful, it's cheap, the people are beautiful, they're really friendly. They completely forgot about the Vietnam War. Because of the French colonization, they have like a really incredible food scene. So like lots of great French bread. Actually, they're kind of like they're famous for pho, which is like a soup, and then banh mi, which is like a liver pate on a French baguette, and the bread is superior. They have incredible bakeries there.
Interesting.
So it's a very weird culture. Communist, of course, but out of all the communists, I like them the best. Yeah.
Interesting.
So Ho Chi Minh's my favorite. Taiwan's great too. They have their own set of issues with China.
Yeah.
And then China's fine. It's just the one-child policy really. They did not think that one through, and that's caught up with them.
Yeah, it's
demographically.
It's only going to get worse, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Well, and there's no catching up from that.
No.
You can't.
No, you guys could do a whole episode on their real estate models.
Yeah.
Yeah. Their commercial real estate's really jacked up, so it's not like us.
Well, and I have to imagine the answer is no, but with all the reshoring of some vital pieces of the supply chain, is there any thought that some of the production of O-rings could be coming to the United States? Is there anyone that does it here?
Well, generally speaking, I think O-rings, most of them, and Harry, he has a terminology, he calls them cheap and cheerful, but like the commodity type O-rings, the ones you would find at like a Home Depot, or at Ace Hardware. I think those will probably always stay. We really kind of surrendered all of our intellectual property and our know-how and our experience. And I frankly don't think like the American laborer has the grit to work in an O-ring factory. These presses, just think like giant waffle irons, really hot, and it's black rubber, so there's tons of carbon black. It's really dirty, sooty, nasty. So unless something changed like really dramatically, I don't see us making the vast majority of O-rings in this market, perhaps in Mexico. And there's more and more production going into Mexico.
Yeah.
And then all the other stuff we sell, like all the custom molded stuff and the weird seals and stuff, those could certainly be made here, and more of those are coming home every day.
Yeah.
And we're seeing a huge resurgence of that in North America.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, because I know there are certain supply chains are coming back, and that's why I was curious if you were seeing any of that. But
Yeah.
with the commodity, I'd imagine that it probably would, a lot of it would stay overseas.
Yeah. There's some like higher end O-rings that go into like semiconductor production and energy production and automotive and aerospace, that never left, that are still made here in the U.S.
Right,
And a lot of those will come back. If they left, they'll come back for strategic reasons. So,
In the O-ring world, are you a lot of, and probably the answer is all the above, but are you a lot of onesies, twosies, or do you have national accounts that you are, constantly just shipping directly from the factory to where they're fabricated? I mean, I assume you're over on Lackman, you're not touching everything you're selling out of there.
Yeah, pretty much everything we sell. So last year I think they did about $15.5 million in revenue.
Okay.
I think it was, we have phenomenal analytics, so I should know these, but I haven't even looked at them. But I think we did like 100 million pieces.
And it's all coming through there.
Mm-hmm.
I know O-rings aren't very big. So
No, they're not generally very big. There's a lot of different business models. Ours is in like kind of a value-added industrial distributor, so we tend to hold a lot of inventory. We do a lot of stocking programs. We do a lot of like customized packaging that drives efficiencies in the production floor. So like in a blue-collar environment, if they're building like a motor, for instance, they're not going to want like just a box of 10,000 O-rings. Because they don't want to count them out for their shifts. So they want them in packages of 50 or something.
right.
So we do a lot of that. We do a lot of kitting where we're making like repair part kits where it's not just an O-ring, but it's like other little bits and pieces that go in a kit you open up and you can repair like a Briggs & Stratton engine or something. So we do a ton of that. But generally speaking, the industrial market's really split in half between two segments. You have the maintenance, repair, and overhaul market, which IBT is probably bigger in that here in Merriam. And the maintenance, repair, overhaul is more onesie-twosie, where they're selling like little widgets to fix machinery and stuff. So plant maintenance. They're selling a lot of like cutting tools, abrasives, lubricants, stuff like that. Shop rags, janitorial and safety products.
Yeah.
And then the other side of the market is OEM, original equipment manufacturing. And that's where you're trying to, as an O-ring seller, as a sales guy, you're trying to get in at these manufacturers of equipment that specialize in some sort of engineered product like a gearbox. And so you'll get into the gearbox on the engineering side, and they'll be looking for like a certain type of seal or an O-ring to seal some gearbox up. And you give them some samples, they test them, they work, and then you're spec'd in, and then you go through purchasing and sourcing. Maybe you have to compete with another source on price or something, or delivery or packaging or something. Eventually get the business, and then we've had customers, original equipment manufacturing customers, for over 30 years now. It's the same ones.
I had a run-in with O-rings. My power steering went out in Colorado, and they looked at it. Once I begged someone to look at it because you couldn't get anybody to look at a car, and they said that it was my power steering and that it needed O-rings.
Yeah.
I looked at the bill. The O-rings were $15.
Yeah.
They FedEx them into the mountains where we were, and the total bill was $500.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Those O-rings probably cost 15 cents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah. And then from a commercial real estate perspective, we have that one location in Lenexa that does all that business. But more generally, industrial distributors are usually branch location heavy. Because the distribution market, especially for for both MRO and OEM, there's a big service level growth happening. And it's this desire for the manufacturer to outsource their supply chain management to the suppliers themselves. And there's a lot of efficiencies to be gained there in the collaboration. And so you'll see like the company to look to there just to understand that market is Fastenal. So if you go look at Fastenal, read their marketing literature, go to their website, they're the best in class at this value-added selling methodology. They have about 2,500 branch locations across North America. That means like a little Fastenal office in almost every small town that has any sort of manufacturing in it. In fact, you'll go into like this little 50-person town, and they'll have one manufacturing plant and then a Fastenal.
Yeah.
Because they have a dude in a blue shirt that's taking parts and literally stocking the shelves at the factory of all of these little things that they consume.
Right.
Yeah.
From janitorial and safety all the way through your O-ring product vertical. They're generalists, so they're trying to sell everything.
Yeah.
And so that's been the traditional model. We have resisted the branch location model and continue to grow out of this one central location here in Kansas City because we have technology that allows us to offer that service level without needing branch locations and dudes in trucks.
Yeah.
And so about a third of the O-ring company's business runs on the ShelfAware platform. About a third of the revenue runs through, I think they have 6, and they're about to install their 7th, or maybe it's 5 and they're about to install their 6th ShelfAware
It's
system.
got to help reduce quite a bit of overhead.
It does. It makes them very efficient as a company. So to do that 15 and a half, they have like 22 total headcount, and that includes my dad and my brother-in-law, and my dad doesn't go to the office. So.
And because ShelfAware will essentially tell your customers everything they would need to know from like what a Fastenal is providing them. They just would have to have the person that physically manages it for them.
Yeah, essentially, like in its simplest form, ShelfAware is just replacing that dude in a truck.
Right.
And the branch location, the necessity for one.
It's replacing. Okay, I got the impression it was handling. When I go and I take something off the shelf in the warehouse and ship it wherever. No. Okay.
Yeah, our warehouse actually doesn't utilize ShelfAware at all. And so in Lackman and O-ring sales, we don't use ShelfAware to manage our internal inventory. We have this big ERP system, and we manage it with an intricate system of bins and a WMS system and a wireless warehouse system that we built out ourselves. But the ShelfAware system's main focus is managing remotely deployed inventories, and usually the supplier owns them, so they're consignments a lot of the times. And these inventories, in our case, are typically deployed in large factories. So you'll go to like a Gardner, Denver facility out in, I don't know, middle of nowhere, Kansas. And it's a 100,000 square foot factory, or maybe 200,000 square feet. It's huge. And to walk from one side to the other takes a while. But if you get into that factory, you'll find pockets of like shelving and racking that are full of inventory. All the little bits and pieces they need to make the compressor. And all those little bits and pieces, if you start to look closer, they're all managed by outside suppliers. And so like a Fastenal guy will come with a blue shirt every day, and he walks around that facility and looks at shelves and says, boy, they need 10 more of these and 100 of this and 50 of that. Right. And it's been that way since the 50s.
And then Fastenal would just charge the manufacturer whatever is taken off the shelf there.
Right. And they typically don't charge for the VMI service, if you can believe it. It's quote unquote free. They're making all their money in the sale of the product. So the service is just an in. It's just a convenience.
It's a personal touch.
Personal touch.
Right.
It's the management of it. It's the outsourcing of the labor. But they're making all their profit in the part itself. And so like Fastenal, I'm just picking on them because they're the biggest name in the industry, but they would sell an O-ring for $1 and it costs 15 cents. Well, they need the 85 cents because they have a dude in a truck and a branch location to support.
Right.
But they're selling that O-ring to that factory, to that location, to the point of consumption on a factory floor.
Yeah.
And I don't want to misspeak or overstep, but so theoretically, with your system having less, less to carry, less cost, ultimately you probably can afford to give customers lower prices than a Fastenal, right? Because you're going to have less overhead.
Yeah, definitely. We have way less overhead, but we're also a specialist, and so we just have better costing on those O-rings than Fastenal ever will.
Okay.
Because
that's your
I have
niche.
Harry. I have the little little guy I carried his bags for. So
Your secret weapon.
Yeah. And that's the truth of most industrial supply marketplaces. Is there's a dying breed of specialists in this country because of low interest rates for so many decades now. there's been so many mergers and acquisitions, and the corporate capitalistic structure we have, where everybody's like charged to grow. You have to grow. They've done it through M&As, and it's turned what used to be very common to find guys like my dad who had built a little company who served a very specific niche in some industrial supply marketplace, and they were, and there was 50 of them, in the country. It's a dying breed, and they've all been gobbled up and turned into this kind of vanilla flavored industrial supply generalist who, like I said, is kind of good at everything but really great at nothing.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to push the trend back by providing a service level that any independent can license and use at their own, like a autonomous level in their own market, and they can work collaboratively with other suppliers if they want. They don't have to. But it gives them the ability to look and feel and taste like Fastenal, but not need branch locations and dudes and trucks.
Right.
Yeah.
Like keep up with the modern service that they're providing.
Yeah, because the truth is we'll never catch up with Fastenal and Grainger and MSC from a capital investment standpoint, from a real estate standpoint. I can't afford to prop branch locations, you know, and it's just not practical. I mean, I could do it maybe in my lifetime, but I can't do it.
Yeah.
I'll be an old man by the time I have like 10 or 20 branch locations, and that'll be the end of my career. And so we could do it a lot faster with this technology.
Yeah.
Well, looking future forward, I know the blockchain, finding a beta to roll that out is a pretty high priority for you. But as the next 5-10 years come about for ShelfAware and O-Ring, do you have a little bit of a vision you can share of kind of what, and if you're looking back 10 years from now, kind of what you've accomplished and what you've been focused on really as far as business goes? Yeah,
that's pretty simplistic. My overall basic goal is just to get, I would love nothing more than ShelfAware to be like tossed out at a Fastenal or a Grainger or even an IBT or Applied Industrial board meeting as like a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, hey, what the hell is this
Who
ShelfAware
are
thing?
these guys?
Yeah, we're getting hit from like every direction. We lost a fastener account last week, and then a month ago we lost an O-ring account, and then 3 months ago we lost a big janitorial safety account in Pennsylvania.
Right.
It's coming from all directions. We don't really know where's the genesis? What is this thing?
Right.
And that's my greatest ambition. If I'm in like the mouths of board members at some of these large billion-dollar companies, then I've been successful.
Yeah.
And if I'm not, then I don't know. I guess it was marginally successful. I mean, maybe I'll make some money along the way. But
I mean, you weren't.
Ultimately for me, I mean, O-Ring's going to be O-Ring's like wildly successful. We get offers to buy that company all the time. It's very efficient. It's a really, really well-oiled company.
Yeah.
And it's going to have a bright future because the O-Ring market is complex enough that they can continue to be a specialist, and we've equipped them with all the tools to continue to grow. And so I think the future for them is just stable growth. They can grow as fast as they want. Frankly, we've put the brakes on growing the company any faster because of real estate concerns. Outgrowing our space, we don't want to move. We're kind of lazy at this point.
We could help you with that.
I know, and we've talked a lot about that. But we should talk about this before we wrap up. But we had a bad real estate experience in Kansas City that kind of colored our real estate future, and that actually was kind of a black mark of my adolescence. Because as a family business, unfortunately, my dad didn't have a lot of friends because he was so busy growing this company, and so he would vent at home, like at the dinner table. And so, I mean, there was tears shed. He kind of scarred my sisters, honestly, with some of the crap he'd bring home about, I'm going to go bankrupt. We're all going to be eating in the streets. My little sister's crying over there thinking about, where are we really going to be, eating out of the gutter? It's like, I don't know, maybe. And I think it's just the boy and the girl thing. It didn't affect me as much. I was kind of flippant about it. I'd be like, oh, Dad's just full of it, whatever.
Right.
It's another day at the office. But my sisters were like literally torn up about it. And one of those experiences was the commercial real estate debacle. My dad tried to build his forever home building out off of K7 in Shawnee. And it was like, I think it was about 10,000 square feet. This would have been like, oh gosh, I graduated in 04. So it would have been like early 2000s. And I won't name names because you guys probably have friends in the construction industry.
To clarify, we weren't involved with this.
Oh, right. Well, not that I know of, yeah. I was in high school when this happened, and my dad took up to this point, he'd rented and leased, and he'd moved several times as the business grew. So he started in the basement in Olathe at a shoe repair shop, had a basement for lease or rent. It was like 500 square feet. Right. And my grandmother was his first employee, and he had $0 in revenue. Like the first year he did like $6,000. And then the second year they actually were quite successful, and he took my mom out to dinner and said, we got a real problem because now we got to pay taxes, and we don't have any money to pay the taxes. She's like, where'd the money go? And he's like, back in inventory to grow, to accommodate for the growing sales. So that was like hand to mouth all the way up until I was in high school. And he's finally at a spot where he's like, okay, I'm going to build my forever home, commercial building, office as mixed space, office, and then backside was warehouse. We used a local Kansas City contractor. My dad's first experience really in commercial real estate. And at the time he was kind of into local politics too. So he was running, kind of managing a local campaign. I don't know, some like school board campaign or something, while running the company and building this building. And he wasn't like hardly at all out at the job site. And things were done at the job site that were done wrong. The big one being a vapor barrier. At the time, I think in commercial construction, they use these vapor barriers on foundations. So they put sand down and then put a vapor barrier down and then another layer of sand to try and, the idea was to keep water vapor from groundwater from coming up and affecting your foundation. Right. What happened was there's a Kansas City typical thunderstorm popped up, and it dropped a bunch of rain, saturated the foundation, and left like basically an Olympic-sized pool on top of the vapor barrier, and then they poured the concrete the next day. So we moved into this building. He sunk a ton of money in it because it was his forever home. So, you don't put up like the cheap vinyl stuff. He did like wood baseboards and like nice finishes, and he had people like pick paint colors for their office, and it was really beautiful. Moved in there. He like practically killed me because moving a company like this is awful. And so he took me out of school and like just worked me like a mule to move into this new building, which is miserable. We hated it. We finally moved in, and we spent a couple months, and then the Kansas City summer came around and got really hot, and the moisture in the foundation started to come through. And the first sign was our office manager, she slipped on the tile, the linoleum in the break room, and because the glue was dissolving. And so she slipped on the tile, and we found out you could just like take the tile and just peel it up by the corner, because all the glue had just turned to like snot. And then that kind of caused us to start investigating what the heck's going on. And there was mold in the office, like all the baseboards were molding, the drywall was molding, the window sills were all moldy. So as soon as we found the mold, we're like, well, shit, now we got to move out of this place like pronto, because we can't have 10 or 15 office folks sitting in moldy environments. And so we found a leased, like kind of took whatever we could get. It wasn't a very perfect fit from a real estate perspective. The building wasn't great for us, but we moved to this place hurriedly. He took me back out of school for like another week, worked me like a mule to move from this forever home. And then we, like long story short, if you don't pay attention to your contract obligations, he signed a commercial contract to build this building that only included arbitration.
Yeah.
And so if you look into the details of a lot of arbitration agreements, they're pretty crappy deals. You get a signed arbitrator, and the assigned arbitrator comes from the construction industry. And so the arbitrator himself is a former contractor. Well, okay, that doesn't seem quite fair.
Right.
So it's not a court of law. You don't get a jury. There's no peers. You can submit some evidence to the arbitrator, but ultimately it just kind of comes down to this dude.
Or this one individual thing.
Yeah, it's one individual thing who we thought was like fairly swayed by the construction market. Gave my dad like a paltry, cash, like damages reward, but it didn't pay for anything. We still couldn't inhabit the building, so we sold it for about 50% what we paid for it. Yeah, and my dad was stuck with like $1 million bank loan, a little over $1 million, and a building he sold for like $500,000, basically. The guy that bought it just ran a screen printing shop out of the warehouse because there was really no mold issues back there. He just plasticed off the front office, and nobody went up there. And the structural engineer said, give it a decade, it'll dry out, and it'll be a great building. But until the water stops coming up through the foundation, you can't put drywall back up, you can't put carpet down.
Continue to happen.
Yeah, it'll just mold it again. Man, so that was like terribly dramatic. Right. I mean, the home life it was a dark period in the Johnson family household. My dad almost went bankrupt. We paid the bank back every penny. He's very proud of that. He's never stiffed anybody, anything in his life. So he paid back every penny of that. And I mean, I haven't even and just until recently, I really haven't talked to him about commercial real estate again because of that.
Yeah.
Because he's like emotionally scarred.
I can see why. Yeah.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Well, it's cool that it didn't sink anything for you guys too. I mean, obviously it was a trying time.
Yeah,
but
yeah, very close
but
close
you
to
were-
sinking us.
you have a persistent father too. It sounds like.
Oh, I think a lot of people would have just cracked. Well, he did kind of crack, to be fair, a few times.
That would crack a lot of
Yeah,
people.
he was pretty cracked for a while.
Yeah,
It was pretty
yeah.
messy. But yeah, he survived. Still married to my mom, thankfully. It did leave some scar tissue that I think is
sure.
like always going to be there
Right.
with the family. But that's part of like business ownership. The business really becomes you.
Yeah.
It's like your baby when you start something like that, and you have a lot of emotions tied up into it. And so yeah, we've been leasing really for like our whole lives now since then.
Well, and it's not a great experience, but it's still a learning experience. And I think, as we've talked about commercial real estate as an investment opportunity, I think you're pretty well aware of a lot of the risks
The ins and outs.
and I think you're gonna be in a good way a cautious buyer, and and so I think with any experience you can learn from it too. Which even if you're wronged in it, there's always kind of a good tidbit to take. with you
Pain
down the
is a
road.
great teacher. Yeah,
Yeah,
Yep,
Yeah.
no doubt.
for sure.
it is
Probably better than success.
probably. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
More memorable, anyhow.
It definitely is. Yeah, makes for some great stories. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And we have some tenants now. So the building we're in now is bigger than we need. We did that knowingly. We leased the whole thing when the opportunity came up, and so then we sublet part of it. So that's been kind of cool. It gave us like the landlord feel, sort of.
Yeah.
Not really.
You guys kind of you get the structure of it.
Yeah. The first time I was like talking to my dad about commercial leases, and I was like, I think it was like the air handling unit, like the commercial air conditioner was going out, and I said like, well, get the landlord over, fix the dang AC, and he's like, it's not how it works, man. Like we got to replace the AC. He's like, what? No way. He's like, yeah, basically it's floors and walls.
Yeah.
Like no.
Well, and it depends on the lease. But
a lot of industrial
speaking,
leases
it's all-
leases are pretty just like basic. I mean, I guess you have your common area maintenance, so like, you don't have to worry about the parking lot. But otherwise,
Well, you're still paying for it. Just
yeah, and your cam, yeah, you're paying for it for sure, but you don't have to worry about it.
Well, and the only flip side of that is you've been over there in Lackman, 20 years now? I mean,
Long time, yeah. I don't know how long I've been there.
unfortunately, had the Forever building worked and
It would have been sweet.
it would have been paid for. It would have been, you know.
Yeah, tax like hopefully tax shelter. That's the biggest burden of any small business right now is taxes, and they just keep getting worse and worse and worse. So that's one of the big, I think, reasons we'd consider it is if we can find any way to shelter what we've built from just getting pillaged. It'd be great.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
Sure.
yeah. Tax burden and regulatory burden; those are kind of like invisible monopolies that big industries put on this country. That we can be very difficult to unwind all that.
No doubt.
Well, I appreciate you sharing and jumping into that stuff. And, I really appreciate, I think we're coming up on our time window, but really appreciate you coming on with us today. And I think our listeners will have a lot of interesting takeaways from the two different companies you got going and also kind of your experience, with commercial real estate in the past. And
Yeah, I mean, it really was interesting hearing about, behind the scenes, stuff that the general consumer like ourselves just have no idea that's going on. So
Oh, yeah.
it's a cool industry and snippet into.
Oh yeah,
into
well,
that.
and candidly, I don't know a lot about O-rings, so even some of it is still flying way over my head. But
Right.
I follow the gist of it, and I know you guys are right in the middle of everything going on in that industry. So
Well, and that's the unique thing about our business is that we get to see so many different snapshots of different businesses that most people don't understand and don't, just take
Are
just
never exposed.
takes for granted.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, and it's kind of my buddies, telling my buddies I'm starting a podcast, and they kind of love giving me a hard time about it. But they were talking today about, Casey's Pizza and how the stock price is soaring and it's been killing it for the last 6 years. And I was like, well, I actually sold them some ground, and they're talking about how it's because they own their real estate and they've been doing this. I was like, I sold them some ground 5 years ago. I think it was kind of obvious they were doing this. And it's like, well, why didn't you tell us in time to benefit from this? I was like, well, maybe you should listen to our podcast.
That's right. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
so-
the real estate
O-rings,
side of it.
O-rings.
Yeah, that's for you, Ben Boating.
That's right. Yeah, get that jab in there. It's I love the market. I mean,
Yeah.
I've always been interested in commercial real estate and like learning more about it. But you're right. It is like a good leading indicator of what businesses are doing
Yeah.
and where they're going. And if their real estate holdings are contracting or if they're growing, then it's a great sign for their general business term because it's long-term deals, and you got to have a lot of foresight on where you build and what you develop, and where the city's headed, where it's growing.
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate you having me on. I love telling our story. It's a fun story. It's kind of that idyllic family business story, but fraught with plenty of drama, and I don't want to underemphasize it. It's terribly hard, and I think there's just not enough negative talked about in the entrepreneurial space. Everybody talks about it being like,
Right. What's going on?
it's so cool, you should do it. And like, it's terrible and miserable most of the time, and tons of risk and lots of losses. So, but thanks for the opportunity to share it all. So it is fun.
And last thing, if anyone wants to reach out to you and learn more about ShelfAware, any potential customers or whatnot, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Best way is to go to LinkedIn and look me up. It's Andrew Johnson, Supply Chain Innovator. I think my first name's Andrew Johnson and my last name's Supply Chain Innovator. So just put in the entire thing and you'll find me. I did that because there's lots of Andrew Johnsons.
Oh, yeah, that's fair.
Or you can go to ShelfAwareVMI.com. That's ShelfAware Vendor Managed Inventory, VMI.com. And you can look up ShelfAware and you can email me through the website.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for coming on.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.